Hi everyone, and welcome to this Pano2VR 101 series on more skins. This webinar will be, as we say, looking at skins. We started last week with just looking at components in skins. This week we're going to be taking you through starting from scratch. I'm Martin from support, and
I'm Karen, also from support, and I'll be behind the scenes here helping out with your questions. And if you do have a question, please use the Q&A tab at the top of the screen. Martin is showing you right now. And also, please try to keep your topics or your questions on topic. We will try to get to all of your questions either by writing or Martin will answer them at the end of the webinar. So, yeah, take it away, Martin. Looking forward to this one.
Okay, cool. Right. So, as you of those that have been following would know that we've started with the basic project and we've just been adding to it. This is the project. You could download it from the webinar registration screen, but as I open it up, we just have Pano2VR. It's got 4 nodes. It's got hotspots already added. As I say, we've already built with this. But what we're looking today is building a skin. So, here is our skin button. I probably mentioned last week that there's 2 ways of getting into it. You can use the skin button in the tools, and you can use the skin button that's actually in the HTML5 output. I'm going to be using this one. So when I click this, if you notice that the skin, I could select one of the preloaded skins, but I'm going to leave it blank. So when we click and open up the skin, I get a new clean blank canvas. I'm now going to save this as my first job I tend to do into the projects folder. So let's go to my desktop. As you can see, again, this was covered last week, but when you open up and save a skin, it tries to save it into the skins folder, but I like to save it to the projects folder. So if anything untoward should happen, I know that I've got a copy of the skin for my project in its own folder. So let's just call this skin and save that. So this is our skin saved. Right, so open up the skin. This is what you're presented with. This is the skins canvas in the middle. We have some tools at the top, and we also have some tools and other options in the menu bar at the top as well. Also, when you've opened up the skin editor and select help, all right, if you go to online help, you'll notice that the Garden Gnome software page opens up, or the Garden Gnome page opens up. It already goes directly to the skin editor help, and you have quite a few of the topics that you'll probably want to know about here, such as skin source actions, and some other headings that we'll probably reference to as we go along. So that's a little bit about the help. The skin itself, we have as I say, if you click anywhere in the canvas, we get the canvas properties. Now we get the canvas size. Default is 640 by 480. We have a grid where we can change the size of the grid. I'm not going to go too much into this. As I say, you can go into the help and look at this, but you can set snap to grid, and depending on the size, you can snap elements as you're moving them around. But I tend not to use that myself, so I'm not going to be covering that today. But as I say, it's detailed in the help documents. And the other one that I want to bring to attention is this margins. Now, what is margins all about? Well, for a start, I'm going to select one of the tools. I'm going to select our draw rectangle. All right, so it's this one. So if I select that and draw a rectangle, here it is. All right. Now, it doesn't matter where I place this in the skin for anchoring, but I'm going to anchor it at the bottom, and I'm going to say that it's going to be, I don't know, like 0 pixels from the bottom, and I'm going to set that to 0. So because I've anchored in the center, you can see these graphics here are saying that I'm 0 pixels up from the top, and I'm now 0 pixels from the center. So it centered it for me. Now this element, or this rectangle, I will refer to the tools as elements because that's part of the terminology that we use. But basically this is a rectangle, and you'll see that its height is 56 pixels. Now if I click back, or if I click this button, this is our live preview. If I select this, you'll see that I do indeed get a live preview. Now the live preview is the same size as my skin canvas, so it's it's in the same position. All right, and when I move the skin canvas around, that rectangle will always stay bottom middle because that's where I've anchored it here. But the actual viewport, if you like, of the panorama will take up this whole area. Now this is where margins comes into it. If I wanted a controller outside of the image of the panorama, I could actually set a margin. Now, as I said, if we go back to the skin, our height of the element or the rectangle is 56 pixels. So if I set a bottom to say, I don't know, 60, all right, you'll see that a red line appears, and this showing me the limitation of the panorama or the viewport of the panorama. And you can see in the live preview now that we've now got this blank area. So the panorama will be in this grey area here. Now what I can do to prove this point is just save, close and export the panorama, and you can see we've now got the bottom part of the panorama no longer visible because we've moved it up. So this is your pano. So this is what margins do. Now you can add margins all the way around. So if you wanted to create a border but you wanted the whole of the panorama to be inside the border, you would set up your margins accordingly. All right, so that's basically what margins is all about. All right, I've seen in other examples where somebody has said, right, okay, let's make the skin canvas twice the size or twice the height. So it would be, the pano would be in the top half, but in the bottom half, they would add, I don't know, a map or some controllers or some other bits and pieces. So when the whole thing's embedded in a page, it looks like that you've got the panorama on itself at the top and all the buttons at the bottom, and it looks like the buttons are in the page, but actually it's all part of the Pano2VR project. So there's a good little one there. Right, okay, so just want to quickly blast through what we're seeing. All right, now I'm going to say quickly, as I say, it's obviously I'm concerned about time. There's I want to do a lot with you, and I feel that this is going to be more than just one webinar on skins because it can do a lot. But basically we have certain tools that I will be using quite a lot, and that's the container. Basically a container is just what it is. It's an empty container. In the file tree or the skins tree, it looks like a folder. All right, we've already seen our container, our rectangle. It just draws a rectangle. There we go. And we also have our text box, where I can draw a text box as well. All right, now all of these elements have similar attributes, but they'll all also have their unique attributes. So as an example, if I draw and add a rectangle to the skin, you'll see that it'll have a position, an appearance, and then it'll have its unique tab. So this is a container, and then under advanced, and then we have actions and modifiers. So this being a container will have its unique attribute, which is going to be masking. So anything inside the container will be seen, anything outside of it won't. It'll be masked off. If I grab a text box and do exactly the same thing here, you'll see we've got the same position, appearance, the rectangle, so I can play about with its physical size. But here it's got its unique tab, so here I can determine what text it's going to display. I can deselect that and change the size of the font and its weight. I can get it to auto size and have other attributes as well as give it some actions and modifiers. Okay, so as you can start to see there's quite a common flavor or theme to all of these with the properties. So basically, depending on the element or the tool that you're adding to the skin canvas, depends on what attributes you can change. Okay, another little concept that we need to identify within the skin is parent-child attributes or positioning. So if I draw again another rectangle and draw another rectangle, you'll see that I have two elements as parent elements in the tree. But if I select, say, rectangle 2 and drag it over here, what I can do is select rectangle 2 and drag it on top of rectangle 1. So now rectangle 2 is a child element of rectangle 1. Now you'll hear me refer to this quite a lot. This is the child-parent relationship within the tree. So with rectangle 2 selected, I can click and drag it around. All right. But rectangle 2 is a child of the parent element, rectangle 1. If I select that and drag it around, rectangle 2 will follow it because it's part and parcel of it. The same thing as with actions. If rectangle 1 has an action, rectangle 2 has an action. If I was to click rectangle 1, you just get the action in rectangle 1. If I was to click rectangle 2, you would get the action in rectangle 2 and rectangle 1. All right, so there is this also bubbling up effect of actions as well. So these are sort of basic concepts that we've got to understand before we start anything really, because this will help. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is, first thing is, if we have a look at my tour, I'm just going to save the skin. I've got some hotspots. So what I want to do then is to make a hotspot. So I open up the skin and we're going to choose this element here. This is called an add hotspot template. Now, what is a hotspot template? Well, it's an invisible element. It can't be clicked on, it can't be touched. And what it does is it anchors itself to the hotspot that you put inside the viewer. All right. Now, talking about the parent-child relationship, if this is the parent, if I add a rectangle to this, let's just quickly put it over there and make it a child of that, what's going to happen is that the hotspot template is pinned to this area, so we'll see the rectangle move around with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce some keyboard shortcuts to speed things up a little bit. So I'm on the Mac, so when I press this button, the command key on the Mac, you'll see it displayed on the screen. Because I'm on the Mac, if you see command, if you're on a PC, basically you would just click the control. So I'm going to do command S to save the skin. So it'd be control S on the PC, and I'm going to do option command G. Now what that does is generates the output for me, so I don't have to keep opening and closing the skin. So what I'm just going to do is just quickly go over to the output, and here we can see my rectangle is now pinned to the hotspot template, which is in turn pinned, or is a child of the hotspot template, which is in turn pinned on top of the hotspot in the viewer. Okay, so that's its relationships going on. Right, so what I'd like to do is start as I mean to go on. So I'm going to give the hotspot template a more meaningful name, and I'm going to call it ht_node. And the reason why I'm coming up with this name, just a quick brief, is that when we select a hotspot, depending on what type of hotspot we're selecting, we would use a skin ID. So basically this hotspot is looking for a hotspot template with the ID _node. So it knows to use this hotspot at this particular, or on this particular hotspot, or rather the hotspot template on this particular hotspot in the viewer. So I could add another hotspot, say for videos, so I could have a different hotspot template with a different graphic. I will cover this later on as we go through, but there's the concepts and why why I'm using this naming convention in the skin. In reality, I could have called this anything I like. If I called that node _2 as an example, and save the skin, I don't have this, but I could then select it from a drop-down list. So you can customize these. You don't have to use our naming conventions, but you know, why not? We've already put them in there, so you might as well. So there we go. So there's our so that's my hotspot. Okay, now what I'm going to do is use the rectangle for my hotspot, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to 40 by 40 pixels. All right, I'm going to set the anchoring to the center, which basically means now my positioning is referenced to the center of this hotspot template. So if I set this to both 0, 0, that puts it right in the middle. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do with this is, because I want a hand action when we hover over it, I'm going to select the hand action. And under the rectangle properties of this rectangle, I'm going to have the background because I want that. I am going to border width. I'm going to deselect the border. I don't really want to see a border. And I'm going to set the radius to 999 pixels from the center, which will turn it into a circle. If I hit the preview, interestingly, I won't see anything because the preview can only show skin elements. If you want to preview a hotspot, you will have to output. So, but because Pano2VR is so quick, so Command S to save the skinned, Option Command G to output, and boom, it's there, and there's our circle. All right, so that's my hotspot image. Now, again, with naming conventions, I'm going to call this HT image, and now I'm going to use the keyboard control like for copy and paste. So I'm just going to say copy, paste. So I've now got 2 of them, and I'm going to call this dot. All right. Now I'm going to drag this and make this a child of the hotspot template as well. Okay. Now with it centered, it will again fall into the same area. Now what I want to do is show you this. I am going to change the color of this to black. All right, so I can change the color there. Now that's changed the color of the dot, and now what I want to do is change the size of the dot to 20 by 20 pixels. All right, so you can now see I've got a white surround with a black dot in the middle. If I was to swap these around, the black dot's gone. And the reason being is because the tree organizes itself from the top down. So the uppermost element is the one that's closest to you. So that would be the dot, and then the HT image rectangle will be the one behind it. Okay, so again, let's see what this looks like in the output. Okay, so let's, oh, wrong button, that one. And you can see the hotspot now with the dot. Okay, and you can also see that the hand is also changing. Right, okay. Now, we need this hotspot to do something. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just add the action for this. So this is now bringing you into actions. I'm making this hotspot template do something. All right, so when I double click into the actions, I could also have just clicked the plus. It brings up the actions dialog box. Now the source is how we're going to activate the action. So I've got a mouse click, double click. There's lots of different things here. So I'm going to just stick with a click, and I'll want this to open the next panorama. So strangely enough, I'm going to use the open next panorama action, and I'm going to want this to open the URL of the hotspot. Okay. And then the next one is the view that we're going to get when we open up the next view. I'm going to change to target view, and that is going to work with the settings in the hotspot editor. So if you click on the hotspot, you'll see that we've got the URL, and this is the target. So this is saying that I'm going to use the target forward and entrance. Okay, so that's basically, if I click this, this is what we now get. So that's literally the very rough outskirts of building a hotspot that then has the action to move nodes. And on that note, I'm going to whack it over to Karen and say, Karen, do we have any questions?
Hi. I wanted to bring Ferger's question in, where he's asking, he's having a hard time understanding what's meant by position and anchoring an element. Would you mind going back over this maybe a little bit slower?
Absolutely, no worries.
I think a lot of people get hung up on this.
Right. Okay. I did sort of cover this last week because we just use components to build a skin, but no worries. It's an important topic. So. And as you say, it's basically the skin canvas does not have to be the same size as your output. The skin canvas can be any size you want. What's important is the positioning and anchoring. So I've just drawn a rectangle. Okay, I've placed it in the skin. And if I move it over here and then see it in the skin preview, the live preview, what you'll see is that rectangle exactly where I've put it. And that's only because The live preview is 640 by 480, the same size as my canvas. If I make the canvas any different sizes, look what happens to the rectangle. It just stays put. And it's doing that because of the anchor position. What we're saying is we're 555 pixels from the left. You can see this arrow coming from the left. So basically, this rectangle will maintain the same distance from the top or from the left of the skin. That will never change its position. If I was now to set this to the top right, so we now maintain a steady distance from the top right of the skin. So when I now move the preview, you'll see that moves with it. Okay. So theoretically, well, I say theoretically, it's not theoretically at all, it's actual fact, is if I copy this and make some copies of it, I could anchor that one top left, I could anchor this one bottom right, and this one is obviously already anchored top right. So if I now look at the preview, you'll see all of those rectangles, but they've all been anchored to their respective corners. So when I move it around, they will stay where I want them to. All right, so this is part of the anchoring and position. The key thing here is you've basically got a couple of clues to where the anchor's coming from. So if you look in the tree, you'll have an arrow here, and also in the elements, so let's have a look at this one here at the bottom. You'll see that the anchor position here, so you can say that where it's coming from the right, and how many pixels it's coming up from the left, from the bottom. So if I was to do 10, 10, this element is now 10 pixels from the right and 10 pixels up from the bottom. When I open it up and preview it, it will always be 10 pixels from the left and from the right and from the bottom. All right, so that's basically the relationship in anchoring and positioning. So again, it doesn't matter really how big your skin canvas is, as long as your skin canvas is big enough to work in. All right. The only other time a skin canvas is important is if you've got 2 or 3 skins and you're going to copy an element from one skin and bring it into another. If you've got one skin that's 500 by 500 pixels, but you have something in the bottom middle and you copy it and paste it into a skin that's 1000 by 1000 pixels, you will find that it's still only 250 pixels. So it won't be copied to the bottom, it will be copied further to the left. All right, so that's the only time really that becomes really important. But other than that, it's just anchoring and positioning of elements. So I hope that cleared that up. But anyway,
Yeah, Fergus says, now I get it, thank you. So yeah. And there's just a few more questions that I think I can answer really quickly. Piero, yes, you can change the skin canvas background color. This can be changed in, what is it, the file?
It's the view. So menu view, you've got canvas background color. We can change it here. You can set a custom or black, white, whatever you want to do. You can also snap to grid, snap to guidelines. These are all covered in the documentation. If I was to go through all of these, then I wouldn't get any further in the build. But basically, as an example, if I add 2 rectangles to the canvas, and in this canvas I select snap to grid, you'll see that it is actually snapping. I know it doesn't look like it, but it is snapping. Also, if you use the cursor keys, I can cursor 1 pixel at a time. If I hold down the shift key, I can jump much bigger gaps. And if I have the view and snap to guidelines set, you'll see these green guidelines now are snapping to show how I've aligned with other elements in the skin. All right. In this early stage of 101 skin building, these are really not needed, but you can change many of the skin.
Yeah. I think it's nice to know that they're there, because sometimes
absolutely.
Menu.
Absolutely. I think in this first one, I think what's good is just to let everybody know that items are there, even though we're not covering them, but an item is there that you could look up and see how to use yourself later on. But it's important to know it exists.
There was another question. It just disappeared. Hold on. Right. So Piero was also asking if, anchoring is considered the right method to make a skin's elements responsive. I just want to note that, Piero, there is a webinar explaining exactly all of this. But the short answer is, yeah, it plays a role. But there's a webinar already for that. Yeah. Unless you want anything to add there, Martin.
No. I'm sort of looking at the time. We've done 25 minutes, and all I've put in is a hotspot. So I'm pretty conscious I need to crack on. But having said that, I don't want to crack on to the detriment of people learning. So
I think it's fine. Yeah, sure. I think Piero says thanks a lot. So I think that's good, and let's move on.
Okie dokie. Right, so let's get back to my hotspot then. What I want to do is, as I say, we've added a hotspot, we've added some attributes to the rectangles, we've turned them into circles, we've changed colours. What I'd like to do now is introduce the concept of logic blocks. Sounds very scary, but really isn't. If I select the base rectangle at the back, here we go, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set its alpha to say 0.5. Now what that does is makes it slightly transparent. So if we have a look at this, or actually if I use the keyboards again for the shortcuts, that will speed that up a bit. Here we go. You can see now that the background of the rectangle is translucent. Yeah, so it's not quite invisible, but it's there. Right. So what I'm going to do then is introduce, as I say, the logic block. Now the logic block is this little button next to the alpha attribute. So when I click this, we get this logic block settings come up, and what I'm going to use is I'm going to say, right, when mouse is over the parent, all right, so when it's over the HT nodes, the actual hotspot template, when that is true, I'm going to set the alpha to 1. All right, so the idea is that when we mouse over the hotspot, that translucent ring turns to a solid. Okay, so let's I might as well save this. You can now see that in action. There you go. So yeah, that's how to make or how to use the logic block for alpha. Now we have a logic block attached to lots of different things. We have them attached to color, and alpha and size and scaling, and again we have these attributes we can change. But I'm going to stop with that because one other thing people expect with hotspots is a text box. So I'm now going to select the draw text tool and add it to the skin. All right, and we're going to call this HTTT, so Hotspot Template tooltip. And again, I'm going to drag and make it a child of the hotspot template. Because it's now a child of the hotspot template, the anchoring and position is relative to this. Okay, so if I set that to top middle, it looks like I've done it already. So 0 would perfectly align this in the center of the template, which it has. And then I can say, right, I'm going to go minus 50 pixels up from the top. So I've now positioned that text box where I want it, easier by using the anchoring and setting the position. Right, now the attributes I'm going to give this is, I don't really want a background. I don't want to see that, so I'm going to deselect that. I don't really want to see a black border around it, or any color border for that matter, so I'm going to set that to 0. Here is the text box's own unique attribute. So under the text setting, you can see that the text in there is called text. The font, I can deselect that and make that slightly bigger. And we have some aligning. Well, I want to align the text center, which is fine. I'm going to set this to auto size on the understanding that it's going to pick the text up from the individual hotspots. In other words, so I won't know really, you know, that size of text or the width of text can change. So I'm going to set that to auto size, and I don't really want anything else. I don't want it to have scroll bars or anything else. So that's all the attributes I want, but I do want to set the text color to white. All right, so there we go. So that's my text. So if I save, publish, and have a look at this, you'll now see that we've now got the text box sitting up top of the hotspot. Now, we're seeing the text all the time. I want this to be hidden. So again, what I'm going to do is select or deselect visible, but use the visible logic block and do the same thing as we did before. Mouse over the parent. When that's true, I want to see the text box. Okay, click OK. And that's exactly what we should get. So if I now save and export that, have a look. And that's what it's doing. Right. Okay. The only thing I've got to worry about now is what text is it going to display. If I close the skin editor, what I want to do is bring your attention to, now this is stacking and it makes life a lot easier, but I need to explain it. When we add images to Pano2VR, under the user data, we've added the title of each image. Okay. If I now select the properties of the hotspot, you'll see that for the title, it's going to use the user data title. All right. But this is classed as my hotspot title. Okay. If I now go back to the skin and go back to the text box and go back to the text attribute to it, I'm going to delete the word text and I'm going to use this little button. It's called Insert Placeholder. When I click this, I then have lots of options. I'm going to go to hotspot and I'm going to ask it to display the hotspot title. When I click that, it puts in what we call a placeholder. Now, what is a placeholder? A placeholder is something that we can use within the skin to take data from elsewhere and bring it in. So in this case, all right, without going too deep into it, that placeholder is lifting the title text of the hotspot and then displaying it. So if I now output this, we get exactly that. And because each panorama has its own title, so this is going to the entrance. You can see it down here in the browser, tour browser. If I hover over it, it says entrance. When I click onto it, I'm now into the entrance panorama. When I rotate round, here is the hotspot to come back to the courtyard. And there we go. So that's our hotspot now that has our title. It automatically pops up and the hotspot is working exactly how I want it to. Now what I can do, now that I've finished with this in the tree or in the skin, in the tree, I could right button click and I have the option to lock this in the canvas. When it becomes locked, I can't select it anymore or do anything with it. All right. I can also select to not see it, so I can deselect the visible of this. When it's deselected, again, it's not an active element. I could do what I want and I can't destroy or break it. So I tend to work on each element as an individual, and when I'm finished with it, hide it. If it's hidden in the skin, it's only hidden in the skin. It does not affect its visibility on the output. So again, if I save, generate the output, have a look, the hotspot is still there. All right, we've only hidden it in the skin. Right, my next task is I want to bring in some buttons. Okay, so I'm going to bring in a set of buttons. Now, again, with all the tools that we have this one here. So let's bring in the skin. So if I hover over it, it says add buttons. If I select it and then click in the skin, it opens an open dialog box to select my button graphic. Now I've got some buttons here. Now, Pano2VR allows single, 2-state or 3-state buttons. I'm going to show you a 3-state button. So I've got a zoom in button here. So it's a PNG. I'm going to select this and it adds the button to the skin. Now, as I said before, it's got its position and appearances, but because it's a button, it's going to have its image, its own attributes. And here you can see this is the normal state of the button. I'm now going to add a mouse over state. There we go. and a selected state. Okay, so that's 3 states in this one button. Now if we preview this, you'll see that actually what I'll do is I'll move that so it's easier to see. Let's move that over here. Okay, so you'll see that now that there's its up state. When I hover over it, we get the green ring around it, and when I click it, it indents. Now when I let go of the mouse, it will pop back out. It's not a toggle, like there's a different way that we would do this, and I will show this in this webinar as well. But when you click and if you want to click and have that button stay out state, then you've got to stack buttons. But basically in the button element, that button element can have 3 states. So that's what I've done there. All right, now this is going to be my button zoom in. All right, let's just call that zoom in. And this will have the actions of, well, I'm going to give it the action of mouse click. All right, I'm going to view, and I'm going to, no, not view, sorry, panorama movement. Let's do that again. So panorama movement, and I want to zoom in. Okay, and I can choose how fast I move in. I'm actually going to set that to say 0.5. I think 1 personally is a bit quick, but let's just show you what I mean. So let's save that, generate the output, have a look. There is my button. I haven't anchored it or positioned it anywhere. I've just chucked it in the canvas, hence why it's randomly in the panorama. But when I hover over it, I get the green line around it, and when I click it, it indents in. But look what it's doing. It's pulsing. It's not giving me that click and I'm zooming in. And that's because of the action I gave it. Now the action, the source of this was mouse click. What I need is mouse pressed. Okay, so when I press and hold it, I get the zoom action all the time until I let go. So again, let's see that in action. Click, hold, and we're now zooming in. All right, that's good. Right, so I want to add another button. So what I'm going to do is click, add the button. This one is going to be, that's the zoom in. I'm going to add the zoom out. So let's just quickly add this, change the graphics to, so that's the over, and this will be the selected state. There we go. And what I can do to save myself a bit of time is if I select this button, I can quickly copy and paste the ID, but just then change the ID to out. And I can do exactly the same for the action. So if I go down, I can select this. I can do the keyboard shortcut to copy it, select that button, keyboard shortcut to paste it. I didn't have to select it, it just pastes it straight in. But all I need to do now is open it up and change that to zoom out. There we go. So we've now got the 2 buttons. All right, so let's just save, close, and preview this. We've got a zoom in and a zoom out, and there's our 2 buttons. Okay, cool. Right, I'm going to add another button, and I'm going to add the auto rotate. And the reason why I want to do this is because the auto rotate has 2 different graphics. And what I mean by that, it shows the button to auto rotate and then shows the button not to. So here you can see this is the auto rotate button, and this is the one to stop it. It's got the line through it. So let's just add this. All right, so again, there's the button. Let's just add the different states to it. So that's the hover, and that's the click. All right, so there's my button. I'm going to add the other one. So let's do the same thing again. Let's do the where are we? Right, so here, so there's the stop auto rotate. Let's look at the attributes to it then. So I'm going to change that to mouse over, and mouse click is this one. Right, so we've got the 2 buttons. Now what I'm going to do here is start to line these buttons up, because at the moment they are all over the place. It's a bit of a mess. So I'm going to move this one to the bottom, and I'm going to say I want this button to be anchored bottom middle. Oh, actually no, I think the easiest way to organize buttons is to say, right, top left, set them to 0 0. So that's my first button. All right, now I know that this button is 40 pixels apart, so I can then select the next button and say, right, that's going to be 40 pixels along. The next button is going to be 80 pixels along, and then the next button is going to be 120 pixels along. All right. Now what I can do here is select the first button that I've positioned, shift click, and then use the edit align top edges. Boom. And they're all nicely lined up together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use now the container, click the container and draw a container around it. And I'm going to call this container the controller. All right. Once that's done, because now all these buttons are child elements of the container is the parent, if I now anchor this to the bottom and set so it's in the middle and say 25 pixels up from the bottom, all of the buttons are there. Now the only thing I've done wrong here, and those that have spotted it already, is that when I was arranging the buttons, I actually wanted these two to be stacked on top of each other. All right, but that's not to worry, because if I get time, which it doesn't look like I will at the moment, I will stack these. But what I'm going to do is say, right, these two buttons need to be stacked. Now, there's several ways of doing this. You can just see where button 1 is, look at where it is in the position in the skin, and just use the same position for that button. Or you can, use because the button is in the container. Now this is another one with to do with the size and positioning. Because button 1 is in the container, if I change its anchoring to top right, it's going to anchor itself to the top right of the parent element. So if I was to set that to 0, it goes there. So if I set button 2 to top and set that to 0, so they're now stacked on top of each other, which does leave me room to slide something else in. But anyway, I also want button 2 to be hidden. So I'm going to deselect its attribute under appearance. So the only button I want visible is to start the auto rotation. So this is quite important when you're building a skin. What do the buttons do? Do the buttons, show what it's doing at the moment, or do they show what it will do? Most UI design is a button will show what it will do. So the visible button I want is the one to start the auto rotation. When I click it, I want to see the one with the line to stop auto rotation. Okay, so I now have the two buttons, one set for visible, one set for invisible. I'm going to give the start auto rotate button the action of, on mouse click, we are going to auto rotate, start auto rotate, speed, let's go to 0.2. I don't want to go too fast. I'll leave all the other attributes or settings as they are. All right, so that's starting the auto rotate. Again, I can copy, select this and paste, but this time around obviously I don't want to start it, I want to stop it. So I've now added the two actions to the buttons. So now what I want to do is a way or method to swap these buttons when the panorama's auto rotating. Again, the way I'm going to do that is under the start auto rotate, I'm going to use the logic block. All right, and that's going to be view. When auto rotation is true, I'm going to hide this button. So hide the start. All right. Now what I could also do is just copy this logic block like that. Go to the stop auto rotate button, select the logic block and paste it. And I'm going to select true here. So when the auto rotating is true, this button will show. Now, I've gone through that fairly quickly. I understand that. And as I say, through time restraints, I do believe we'll be visiting this very, very soon again. But here you can see we've got the start auto rotate. When I click it and the panorama starts to auto rotate, the logic block will kick in, hide the start button and show the stop button. And there it is. All right. When the panorama is stopped, so if I manually stop it, the logic block then kicks in and tells the buttons that the auto rotation is stopped, therefore I'm swapping them back again. But because I've started the auto rotation with a click, it's got a 5-second delay and it will start to rotate again. You physically need to click the button to stop it to physically stop audio rotation. Now, I know I've gone a long way in there without stopping and asking questions, but I am very conscious of the subject and the time I've got. So at this point, I'm going to ask Karen, do we have any more questions?
Hi, I think we don't have any. Oh, we have some questions, but if anyone has any questions about the logic block that you just saw, write it in now. But earlier, we had some questions come in. For instance, can you have two skin editors open at the same time and copy and paste elements between them? And yeah, the answer is yep.
Yep, you can.
Just go into the file menu and add a new window, or I think you can even use Command Control N to
Yeah, you can also use, if you're working on this skin here, you can open up a new instance and then select from the menu, file, open, and see one of the other skins. So you can then have the two instances open side by side.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
and then another question, looks like somebody is coming over from Flash Days, and they were asking if you can import your own coded buttons that you made in Flash, and the answer is, sorry, no, we can't. Flash isn't supported at all anymore. And Piero had asked, when you were organizing all of the buttons, he asked if it would be quicker to add a container and then put all the buttons inside the container and then set the position of the container.
I think it's horses for horses. It's how you want to work with it. I tend to line my buttons up first because I know my buttons are 40 pixels wide. It's actually easier to go 0, 40, 80, 120, line them all up on the top, then wrap a container around it.
And I think it's, I have also a different method. So I think it's just however you figure to move, what makes more sense to you. But I think that's the beauty about the skin editor, is that it's actually quite flexible in this case. You don't have to do everything the way Martin is showing you here. There's other ways around it, but Martin for sure has found probably the best way to manipulate.
It's the best way for me,
Yeah.
I haven't got a mathematical brain. I can't sit there and go, right, here's a button, it's 32 pixels wide, so the next one's going to be blah blah, and if I want to go negative, I can't do that. My brain's just not wired for that. So I tend to say, right, well, if I put it at the top, I know it's 0, 0, so the next one, if it's 32, is 32 pixels, then the next one's 64, and it makes it easier to arrange, and then you can just wrap a container around it. Once you've wrapped your container around it, you can manipulate the container very, very easily. So yeah, that's just how I work.
Mm-hmm. Ferger is asking if you can position a button relative to the container as opposed to the canvas. And
I did that earlier.
Yeah, I know that was done earlier, but maybe show it again, because again, this is something I know I forget a lot.
Right. Okay.
Just to
no problem. Right. Okay. With the parent-child relationship, when you've got a button that's a child element of the container, its positioning is referenced from the container and not from the canvas. So with buttons 1 and 2, which is my auto rotate button, you'll see that what I did was anchor it top right of the container and set its position to 0, 0. So there's no pixels coming from the right or from the top. So therefore it's right in that corner. And I did that for both of those elements. You could choose both of those buttons and then set the attributes together. So if I wanted them 40 pixels away, so it's next to the zoom out button, then I could do that quite easily. I can just select those two elements again. This is with a shift control for the PC, command on the on Mac, and then just change those attributes. The important bit here is, hang on, let's put that back to a 0. The important bit here is remembering this anchoring and the child-parent relationship. Obviously, we can only change within a parent or in an element once we're a child of it. All right, so that's that. Okay, I am very conscious on time. We seem to have spent an awful long time on not doing a
We
great
still
deal.
have a few questions I want to get
Yeah,
in.
no, but I'm just sort of thinking, should we wrap it up here and bring it into a part two, so we
Oh, I
spend the
see.
rest of this just purely for Q&A. I think this might be a good idea, to be honest.
Maybe. I think because there are some questions that I think what's happening is we're starting to get a better grasp of how the skin editor is working, and so then once you start understanding a little bit better, then the more questions come, right? So let me see. So I wanted to go back to Thomas's question, which Thomas's question is asking if you can, how do you turn the controller buttons on and off in the edit skin configuration?
Oh, excuse me.
You know, because of course, when you want to turn off zoom, or you don't want to have zoom on, or you don't want to show the gyro button, repositioning those elements they are crucial, right? How do you get those gaps to change? And I think that is a more complicated answer. Probably.
It's using parts that we haven't touched yet. I mean, it's using variables and logic blocks together. We haven't touched variables yet. We've just literally touched on actions and seeing some of the logic blocks. There is another element to the skin, which is a variable, which at this early stage is no need to mention just yet, but these are all needed to do this job. Basically, what we do in a nutshell is we expose a variable, which I haven't covered, all right? But when we expose that, you can then select whether you want that variable to be a yes or no. If that variable is a no, we hide the button. If it's a yes, we show the button. It's as simple as that. There is a lot more that goes on behind the scenes than that, but in a nutshell, and its simplest form, that's what's going on. But because we've not shown variables, I can't show you.
Yeah. And if you're really curious and you get the whole idea of variables and everything, you can look into the built-in skins and see. It might be hard to to kind of work it out how they're working, but it might give you some clues on how this is done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then let's see. Beforeman. So is asking, is a container a controller that groups a bunch of elements? Do all the elements have to be the same type? Can you have anything in a container? So there's like two questions there.
A container is what it says it is. It's a container. It can contain lots of things. It's a bit like your fridge. You can have your beer in there, you can have your meat in there, you can have a sandwich in there. It's the same thing with the container in the skin. I can draw a container. I don't have to draw it around anything. I can just draw one in the skin. I can, then draw a rectangle. I can just do let's put a map element. I've not touched that yet. There's a map element, and I can drag them all into that container. All right, so that container now, I can move that around and they're all pinned. I'm just using a container here because what a container is also good for, I didn't want to select everything, sorry, is if you have elements in the skin like this, let's put a couple in there, I can select the container, click and hold and draw around it, and then the container will snap to the size of those elements you've done. So that's what makes it a great element for buttons. It's also transparent, and it's also by default non-active. In other words, in the actual output, you can still click and drag the panorama through it. It's a non-active element by default. That's not always the case, but by default. So for things like buttons, where you only want the button to be an active element, you can chuck a container around it and it's ideal. So yeah, because people like, your buttons to hide and show. We don't want to have an action on each button to hide and show each button. In this case, we only need to hide and show the controller or the container that is the controller, and all of them hide. So it's good for grouping elements, but the elements can be anything.
Right. I think that's an important concept there, that you can add you can add actions to the container, and you can do things to the container to get everything doing to get the buttons doing everything all at the same time. It's you can hide them and show them. Beforeman's also asking if you can show how to access the other instances of skin. So, how do you work with them if you have more than one editor open? I think that's
right. You want to see, right? Okay, you want to see two editors open. All right, let's do that side by side. I'm going to minimize that, put that there, open that one. So there's one skin, there's the other skin. With the new one selected, I can file, open. It's recent, so let's do. This was what we're building, but complete. Right. This is what I was hoping to achieve today, but just couldn't. But there you go. That's what I was going to do. So theoretically, I could have selected the container here with all my buttons in. I could have selected this. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut copy. I could have selected this skin and just pasted it in. Oh, let's just bring that back and pasted that into my skin here. I won't, obviously, because I'll destroy what I'm doing here. I will save this and we can carry on again from where we left off. But yeah, I've now got two skins open. I can then copy and paste between the two. The interesting one to know is this one. Let's go back to Pano2VR. Where are you? Here it is. This one is from my HTML5 output. This one was just from the tools. So the ones I want to copy from my donor skin, I've used the tools because I want to copy them into the active skin that I'm using for my project under the HTML5 output. Okay, so there's the two.
Thanks. Yeah. So Thomas is asking that he's noticed that a lot of the components are made of a bunch of different elements, and he's asking, wouldn't it be a good idea to have them all contained in a container? So how come some components are not in a container and some are? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if we look at something like the video element, yeah. So if we go video element file, so let's just open it up. That's this one. I will actually now double click and add it to the skin. All right. So there's my skin. Let's just make these a little bit wider so we can see what's going on. Another little trick, as I said before, when I finish working with something, I can just hide it. So now I'm only seeing the elements of the video. Now, if I was to put a container around this, I'm fixing the size because everything will be positioned to the size of the container. If I then open this up in a skin canvas, which is a different size, that close button will not be top right of my skin. It will be top right of the container. So in this instance, it makes perfect sense because the player will always be in the middle of the skin. The controls at the bottom will always be at the bottom of the skin. If I wrap them in a container, these will be constrained to the size of the container and they won't position properly, and then you're going to have to start repositioning and resizing the container to fit your skin, and you could get into a little bit of a problem. So it just makes sense not to, really.
Yeah, so I guess, Thomas, now if you go back to look at the components, you'll notice that, controller is going to sit within the limits of the container because it's a controller. It doesn't need to grow. It doesn't need to be part of the full. It can stay contained. I'm having a loss of words today. But I think.
Oh, lost you.
Answered. Oh, you hear me? Am I still there?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. So I think we got everyone's questions answered. And I think that's it. Unless anyone has one last question, I think we can wrap this up.
Right. If anyone hasn't, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this project and leave it on the computer ready for next time. There's a good question next time. I'm not sure. I'm going to hand this over to Karen because I really don't know what's happening next week. I'm personally away.
Yeah, we're going to take a break next week. So no webinar next week. We're going to take a break. We're going to give your brains a break. We're going to give our brains a break. We've been doing this nonstop since March. I don't even remember, for a long time now. So we're just going to have a short break. And I think in the meantime, everyone can practice working in the skin and working, playing around. And then afterwards, Martin, when you come back, we'll carry on from here. And
absolutely, I shall leave this project as is, as you see it, and we can return to it, and then we can add to where we want to do, or add the elements that I wanted to. And obviously, as we're going to spread it over another week, we can add more. We can add maps, and we can explore all the different other elements of the or tools of the skin. So
yeah, cool.
Make it comprehensive.
Yeah, great. Okay, well then I think that's it. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Thanks for all the questions. It's great.
Absolutely. Well, as I say, thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it. As I say, it makes our day that we can help you guys, and and if you guys can use the software, then and you're more comfortable using it, then you're going to like us even more, which is great. So on that one, I'm going to say, until next time, I'm going to bail out and say, bye everyone.
Yeah, bye. See you in a few weeks, hopefully.
All right. Bye.
Bye.